You can hardly find an Armenian who has never dreamt of seeing his historical motherland, because each Armenian family has a legend born in the past. These legends differ. They tell how the people who were taken away believed that they would return to their motherland, to their grandfather's home that was abandoned and left far away. The motherland dreamt about by millions was called historical. The first big city after passing the Georgia-Turkey border that greets the traveler is Kars. At the very beginning, it comes to your mind that not only the ruins are seen here, as many of us suppose, but a proper little city with its own features and narrow, long streets. It is most expressive to step on the land of Kars under the moonlight. In the evening, the picture of the city is completed by the new scene of the fortress. Kars is really beautiful at night. And when the morning comes, you really start to understand how it is in reality. As in all the cities of the region, Kars also has old and new districts. An old city is stretched out around the fortress. The natives of the old districts were Armenians. They lived in the two-story houses. Of course, it is hard to feel the color of the full value of Kars today, as only the ruins are left here. Kars was a residence fenced with stone walls, a palace citadel, suburbs, and small, casual-formed squares. There were also inns, bathhouses, and churches there. What can be found in Kars today? Among the number of mosques, you try to find something dear to your soul. You find yourself in a city that has been considered as Armenian for ages, don't you? History has been so cruel, and the stranger that settled down here has wiped out your history entirely. And wandering to find one's own history leads you there unintentionally. A city sanctified by holiness is full of nobleness, magnificence, and might. Everything seems so trivial beside it, even you. But it stands silent and dauntless, and seems that only disdain saves it from the surrounding reality. This is Saint Arachelots, the Church of the Holy Apostles, the Cathedral of Kars. For each new master, Arachelots has served once as a mosque, once as a church. It was founded by Abbas Bagratuni I in the 10th century, when the capital was moved from Varak Avank to Kars. The church was changed to a mosque for the first time in 1579. Today, it is an acting mosque, but thanks to God, there were no other architectural changes done on it. The church has the emblem of Bagratuni kings and pictures of apostles. Only the description of the appearance would not be enough to represent Arachelots completely. Arachelots is not an ordinary church. It is an Armenian soul which comprises a Muslim reality. We faced a problem. The church, turned into a mosque, was prohibited to be photographed from inside, but we needed to be inside to see what Arachelots felt while being in such a strange world. We were asked to take our shoes off. At first, when you are surprised by this kind of request, it seems to be inscrutable. But a moment later, you realize that this cross-shaped, centripetal dome building is a mosque that is only stepped into barefooted. We took off our shoes, crossed ourselves, and stepped in. We took pictures of the church secretly. As a result, you see exclusive stills which otherwise could have never been recorded. The mullah told us that the church had been abandoned for a long time and served as a grass barn. They had decided to clean the area and changed it into a mosque. He told us everything with such enthusiasm that it was as if he had performed a great act of heroism. Afterwards, he asked us which would be preferable for us, if the building were desolated or were taken care of. Could it make a difference whether it's a church or a mosque? By this question, he tried in vain to find like-minded thinkers among us. Hey, mullah, you'd rather ask us about it? If asked, then, if the Christian is in the church, he prays. It took some time to persuade the mullah to let us pray there. It was incredible, but the liturgy was celebrated. A group of Christians kneeled in the ex-church, the mosque, and started to pray. History preserves the birthplaces of honored Armenian people. Kars' history has kept the name of Charents, but that same history doesn't mention in which street and in which house our creative, courageous poet was born. This fact has been left to our judgment, as that kind of thing is never forgotten. But unfortunately, what is fixed in history, people often forget. The only thing that prompts it is a home with the words Satelik. In other words, it is sold. The house has its own legends, which brings us to Charents' childhood. They say, every day on his way to school, Charents always took food, and while crossing the bridge in front of the house, stood on it for some time. First his umbrella, then with each passing moment, things from his home started to disappear from sight. As it later became known, a tramp lived under this bridge. They were friends. Every day, Charents talked to him for some time, gave a present that he had brought from home, and then went to school. Unfortunately, the building that is worthy to serve as the Charents Museum is today half ruined, the rooms full of rubbish and weeds. Formerly, Kars was in the Vanant province of the administrative region of Ararat. The first lords of Kars were the ministers of Vanant, and Kars was their first castle and settlement. In 928, Kars became the capital of Armenia. In 961, the capital was changed to Ani, and Kars stayed as the capital of the youngest branch of the feudal system of Kars or Vanant, part of the Bagratuni dynasty. During the Mongolian invasions of the 9th to 13th centuries, Kars had considerable progress in its history. Legends were born about the treasure of the city, treasures which were stored from around the whole world. That was the time when the unassailable fortress was built. Kars, as well as other Armenian cities built in the Middle Ages, was a fortress city, and Armenian historians represented it as Bert Garuts. From the 9th to 13th centuries, the city started to form around this fortress, and later it became a citadel. Further, in the period of Iran-Turkey usurpation, an Armenian fortress that was in the eastern part of the city was ruined. But taking into consideration the location of the city in a border zone, the Turkish people periodically strengthened it by new defensive buildings. These activities continued to such an extent that Kars was considered to be a world-known fortress in the middle of the 19th century. Today, also, the fortress is solid and open for visitors. It seems to wield power over the city by its majestic appearance, reminding us of its entire past. At present, Kars is half a province and half a city, where there are many little shops and tea houses. The modern mode of life and the soul of the Middle Ages are synthesized in the same reality. While walking in the city, you may see an old civil building. For an instant, you seem to be in Gyumri. The buildings are very similar, having the same monumental exterior and refined contours, and a little gloominess can be seen here too. You can always see children in their blue school uniform. If you followed them, they would bring you to the Museum of Kars, as it is just in the vicinity. The most interesting item and exhibit of the museum is the door. The two decorative wooden crosses had been scraped, which nevertheless could not reduce the creation of the genius, as it's an example of the art of engraving. Out of the museum, to the right, you can see an interesting item. It is an ordinary carriage where the fate of current Armenia was sealed. Those who affixed their signatures were Kazim Karabekir Pasha, the head of the Turkish delegation, and Ganyetsky, the chairman of the Soviet delegation, who, sitting on this ordinary chair, signed the ill-fated agreement and, in an instant, with one touch of the pen, destroyed the fate of a whole nation. With Russia's mediation, all the agreements of a peace, which gave privileges to the Armenians, were cancelled. The region of Kars and the western part of Armenia passed into Turkey's complete authority. Armenians were deprived of all rights. Diplomatically, Turkey had a great victory. In the countryside, the ancient three-way bridge was probably built in the 13th century, even though it doesn't have any inscriptions and is modern in its style. There is a bathhouse in the neighborhood that doesn't even remind about its ancient age. It serves as a dwelling for the native pigeons. We found this much Armenian in Kars. The rest was unknown and strange for the Christian soul in an ancient motherland. From Kars, we moved to Ani. That is the Armenian Bagratuni's king's city of glory. As per Leo's notes, the city of disappeared ones was waiting for us. We had heard much, but to see the real seemed unreal. From two sides, desolated, wide prairie with rich soil accompanied us. But there's one thing that makes you stop and forget for a moment that you are in a hurry. Just on the road, in the middle of the field, there's a monument for the visitors of Ani. It was built by the government of Kars in 1992, and it has an attractive political appearance. The notes on the monument were disturbing, especially for the offspring of victims of the disaster of genocide. It told how the Armenians had entered a Turkish village and slaughtered its inhabitants during the withdrawal of the Russian army. These words seem to be taken from the events of the beginning of the last century of Armenian history. Only the main characters were changed here. Seeing this once, you understand that some people think they can wipe out the true history, but they are mistaken. The attempts to falsify the facts in this way are senseless, as long as you know and remember your history. Ani is just ahead of us. Before entering the walled city, another ordeal awaits the traveler. The road passes through backward little Kurdish villages, which lead to the ruins of Ani. On the walls of the houses, some little authentic relics are seen, which later proved to be taken from the city. These relics seemed to gasp for breath, pressed into the crude and coarse buildings. To build their stony hovels, the natives could not find better material than the stones of the monuments of Ani. But Ani, in turn, has lost the hope of restoration of its old, powerful beauty. So-called Armenian Pompeii, as many used to call Ani, starts with its amazing walls. Only Ani can give a complete picture of how an Armenian could protect his own. The proof is a great Armenian king's created walls, which have the proud appearance as had their creator, Sumpat conqueror Bagratuni II. During 8 years he constructed a building which was named after him, Sumpatashen. Corresponds to his name, so amazing and strong. This wall not only served as protection, but also as an adornment. This giant building was made with yellow, red, and white stones. The masters often put jewelry in the stones. The walls are quite damaged, but their firmness is revealed in the major door, the main entry of Ani. From two sides, the city is protected by 3-story towers. It seems that after admiring Bagratuni's creation, you are going to see the holy city, but at first, one must bow down to the Bagratunis. In the second row, just in front of the entry, the running lion exhibits the Bagratuni dynasty's shield, which symbolizes its strict attitude to the one who enters Ani. After a few steps to the west, all of Ani is opened in front of you. Linked by an arched entrance, Ani is very picturesque. Having a difficult existence, Ani at the same time was ruled by kings, Bagratunis, Zakarians, and Palavunis, whose names were synonymous with the success and happiness of Ani. Yet there were also those who were dictators, hated and unaccepted. In 977, when Sumpat II came to the throne, Ani was just a young capital. His father, Ashod the Merciful, founded Ani as a capital and became the first king of Ani. He built a wall around the citadel by which the city was bordered. Ani grew by the hours, and soon it needed to be enlarged. As Matthew Urhayetsi said, continuing his father's work, Sumpat built the present wall and enlarged the city. The lengthened arrow, flung by a bow, would fly. He founded the decorational style of the city. After 8 years of building activities, Sumpat laid the foundation of the cathedral in the new part of the city. For building the cathedral, besides constructing a church with royal splendor, great talent was also needed. Ani gave birth to such an architect, whose name was Turdot, the result of his soaring imagination being Saint Katolike Church. It took 20 years to build. Sumpat entrusted the construction of the work to Turdot, yet died at the beginning of the work. Katranide, who was the wife of the king Gagik Shahanshah, who was Sumpat's successor as king, decided to attempt the task and took the management of the building construction in her hands. According to legend, in her dream, Katranide saw an angel come to her and tell about the idea of a church, promising to help the builders as long as the Arabs see the advent of Jesus Christ. It was a dream, but who knows? Maybe today this angel still stays in the church of Katranide, and maybe it is thanks to this angel that in 900 years the temple was never brought to its knees. Saint Catholica is firm, yet half dead. At a far distance, the contours are dominating and mighty. Yet from nearby, its wounds are apparent. The most dreadful thing is the gap, seen from the west. It seems the wounded corner is unable to link the two walls, and if ill luck would have it, destruction would happen to this queen of the ruins. Coming into the church, all sounds are reduced to silence. Words are unable to express anything. The most talented artist is unable to even paint the flight of the arches, the play of the light and shadow. Just fancy, Turdot is everywhere you look. He didn't want to express his idea in the splendor of ornaments. Wherever you look, the clearness of thought is felt. The grandeur is incarnated just in the simplicity of the style, and with woman-like delicacy it captures the one who enters it. 4 columns and the arches that link them give the impression of airy erection. But what captures one's eye are not the adornments, but the harmony of lines and arches. Undoubtedly, the impression is much more majestic when the dome is revealed on the walls. Even a trace of it has not been preserved. Only the measurements of the opening and cracks prompt that it has been large and majestic. And the public worship is served not by a priest, but birds of the city sitting in the wall's cracks. The legends tell us that there were 1001 churches in Ani. This is the figure that is used in the East to show a great multitude. The legend is considered to be just that, a legend, but the thing that there were very many churches in Ani is for sure, one better and more gorgeous than the other. The art of building gave brilliance to the small churches too. The proof of this is Holy Savior. Or, rather, the proof is actually what remains of the church. Today, only one half is preserved. Basically, it has been ruined. The whole structure was built as one unit, and was so solid that even after dividing into 2 parts, the dome has not been completely ruined. Holy Savior is a monument that was famous in the period of the Pahlavi dynasty, in the better days of Ani. It was built in 1035 by Prince Abu Gharib of Pahlavi. The manuscripts testify that the prince had a palace here, which he presented to the church. Another benefactor built a bell tower. The church owned both summer and winter porticos, or porches, but nothing has been preserved from all these. It is not so easy to enter the church. The stones of the ruined parts have fallen inside it. The walls are picturesque. And when looking up, you see sacred images in the blue, reconciled with the sky, and for a moment it seems that those images are seen not on the walls, but in the sky. The Church of Dikran Honens. To the south of Holy Savior, the numerous scenes of the gorges of Ani are revealed. On the edge of one of them, there is a little square where the wonderful church of St. Gregory the Illuminator, the Church of Dikran Honens, is situated. It is ornamented from both inside and outside the church, thus the Turkish name Nakşel Kilise, or Decorated Church. It is a little copy of the cathedral. The visitor is captivated by familiar delicate structures, columns, and arches, with enriched patterns of sculpture. The interior is well preserved too. The walls and roof are completely decorated by paintings. Some pictures with religious motifs are seen here. There are parts where the paintings have been scratched or scraped. For example, there are cases where the eyes of Jesus Christ suffered the same fate. This can be explained as hatred for religion. The pictures were created by Greek artists. This is certified by the records on the wall. Since the style of the paintings is somewhat Byzantine, one might think they have Byzantine origins, but a literate opinion makes the visitor accept the contrary at once, as the whole history written in the Armenian language tells the details of the story of its construction. History tells how the benefactor, Dikran Honens, had built the church of St. Gregory the Illuminator. Not only a human's hand made this building so beautiful, it was also decorated by nature. Coming out of the church, an amazing scene created by nature makes you stand and admire it. This is Galitsor. The curve of the Harutyun is very picturesque. This makes you understand that Honens had exclusive taste if he could create such a wonder. While mentioning the underground and caves of Ani, it should also be noted that these two things completely differ by their essence. The caves of Ani are visible and are spread over the whole territory of the gorge, extending from Galitsor to the depths of Zalgotsadzor. But the underground is unknown and invisible, the existence of which is testified only by the evidence of different witnesses. In comparison with underground Ani, the caves were populated up to recent times, which in itself was a real city. There are different types of houses, also, many shops dug in the caves, and a market which was situated in the whole district. There were also 2 churches in the caves. It was here that the loose structure of the mountains made the work of the population easier, digging and making life prosperous. There were houses for rich and poor people. The first ones consisted of many rooms and floors. The second ones were big, squalid cavities. The rooms even passed one through the other. The illumination was done by small, round windows. It is surprising how different dwellers of this city were by the mode of the life under the same roof, alongside the smart and tall constructions in the cavities of the mountains. There is a single church to the northwest of the cathedral, which undoubtedly would draw any visitor's attention. It is attractive mainly because it has preserved its wholeness in this place of ruins. This is St. Gregory of Abu-Rahman's church, which is one of the oldest churches of Ani. It is older than the cathedral. Abu-Rahman's has neither the luxurious patterns, material, nor sculpture that can be seen in the Honen's church, but instead thin, delicate cornices and arched doors and windows. The church has been preserved up to and including the dome. This is not a parish church, but a chapel of the Pahlavi princely dynasty, situated in the patrimonial catacomb. When was it built? History doesn't say anything about this. With an uneasy smile, we were admiring the sightseeing of Ani, recollecting the past events and pondering its glory, when a burst of anger and hatred burnt inside us, remembering how the city was destroyed by the enemies. Thus falling into our thoughts, we heard some voices which became louder and louder. While the object became nearer. It was a Kurdish goat herder who was singing in a low voice and grazing his goats. His song hardly matched the scenery of the city. It was so strange that for a moment you stopped and tried to understand, what did they have in common? For which sin was Ani obliged to bear all this? In his turn, the goat herder didn't lose the chance and decided to try and sell some ancient remains of jewelry found on our native piece of motherland.
Bak burası da bak şey. Bak bunu delik buradan. 2 milyon ver bir sigara alayım bunu sen. Sigaret. Ben sigaret burası. Okey. 1, 2, 2 milyon. Her gün bir yana düşer. Her gün bir yana düşer vay. Ağam olasan Ömer Paşa'm ola.
Gagashen, the Church of Gagik. Zvartnots Temple of Varak, which was designed by Nerses the Builder, a Catholicos in the 7th century, had been one of the most beautiful and amazing temples in Armenia. Osorik tells that Gagik I Bagratuni admired very much the temple of Varak, which was already in ruins at that time, and began to build a church with the same construction in Ani. Nerses the Builder dedicated Zvartnots to Gregory the Illuminator. Gagik I also dedicated his new church to Gregory, yet people called it Gagashen, meaning made by Gagik. Osolik speaks about the beauty of the church with great enthusiasm, even though Gagashen is just a revival of Zvartnots, but there are some differences in the construction. The architect of Zvartnots had used sandy stone material in the pressure-threatened places. The church of Gagashen was built with the stones of an extinct volcano, which probably became the reason of its splitting in the future and needing to be rebuilt, using auxiliary walls to strengthen the church. During the first earthquake, the building was completely ruined. This destruction took the lives of the many who were praying inside at that time. Gogik was so eager to design a church similar to Zvartnots that he had made no attempt to pay attention to its solidity and firmness. The mosque, as it was qualified by many specialists who have visited Ani, is situated on the edge of the curve on the way to the citadel. The tower greets the visitor as a defense which served as a minaret. The western side is completely ruined, leaving an open space in the construction. It was because of the high tower that the building was called a mosque. Today, the stairs lead to the top of the tower, where praise of Islam's Allah had been glorified. But is it right to call it a Muslim holy place? The very place where the minaret is linked to the real construction tells us there was much difference in the two. They say it had been a court. It's a magnificent hall, the attractiveness of which is 3 rows of columns and the rows of arches linking them. And the hole in the ground certifies the existence of some dark rooms under the ground floor. They also say that it had been built for prisoners and became a mosque later on when Ani was conquered by enemies. One of the most impressive scenes of Ani is the one which can be seen in no other place in the world. It is a place decorated not only by man, but also by nature. It is the clear, fast-flowing Harutyun River. How miraculous it is in this world of death. Yet, they are like a fresh, life-granting spirit. Just in front of the lower window, under the arches, deformed walls shoot up above and between the 2 sides of the river. It is hard to believe these are the remnants of the 2-story bridge in Ani, which was wide and firm in the past. They say it consisted of 2 stories, and as the traffic was very heavy, it was arranged for both cattle and pedestrians, which were very likely and probable for those times. It also had to be used because there was no other place to the north to link the capital. It was already evening in the city of the lost. In the twilight, when dusk was falling, the shadows start to hide the wounds of the city, as if the centuries are flying back, and in an instant, Ani restores its mightiness. It becomes more thoughtful and reserved. The whisper of the walls also maintains silence, and only then you understand that it's time to leave the city alone, so that it can recall its past memories and ring the grandeur of its fame in order to live the forthcoming days in the future. It is a great dream of every Armenian to see Mount Ararat, but the thing we saw was impossible to even dream about. In the dead of night, we appeared in Dohu Bayazet. We passed the city quickly and rushed to Ararat. Here, Ararat is in front of us. Dear God, how grand it is with its greatness, and in the moonlight, standing in front of you, and with a noble silence, is looking at you. For a moment, a single word wasn't spoken, and our amazement seemed to freeze in the air. Ararat didn't yield easily. In the morning, instead of the mountain, we saw a gathering of white clouds, which, swimming tenderly in the sky, gave no hope of leaving. Standing here didn't mean that you had the honor of seeing the giant king. 2 days later, the clouds disappeared, and now Ararat revealed itself at last. Satisfied by its royal appearance from the distance, the mountain called us near to it. Have you ever dreamt of being on Ararat mountain? Have you ever imagined to see its image at such a short distance? To lie down and feel the warmth of its breath? If yes, then words and feelings are needless here. The lower half of the mountain can be climbed by car, but the second half needs the help of an expert and would take at least 2 days. Soon it began to rain, clearing away the dust that had collected. The colors of the rainbow raised up to the top of the mountain, opening a new, clear path for us. It was meant that it was the time for the giant king's meditation. Up to the first half of the 14th century, the city was called Daroink. Bayazet is supposed to be renamed in honor of Ottoman Sultan Bayazet I. Today, Bayazet is a little, ordinary city, with its restricted streets and senselessly arranged shops, built in 1920 on the uninhabited plain. Maybe this is the reason that you cannot find such ardor and fervor here as in other cities. The constructors of Bayazet were not Armenians, but Turkish people who built the city in the period of Soviet power. Daroink was situated farther into the country and had been spread around the fortress, which is the only thing that speaks about the existence of the Armenians in those times. The fortress also was not completely considered to be Armenian, as it was reconstructed and transformed by different nations. The walls comprised the layers of periods that had been fused together and became evidence of something destroyed by man, yet with the proof of its mightiness still evident. In the territory of Armenian Daroink, beside the fortress, you may find the palace of famous Isaac Pasha, which is one of the well-known places for sightseeing in Bayazet today. The palace was built by Armenian architects. It is very beautiful and has all the necessary items belonging to a real prince. It has a wide, open-air hall. A court is to the right, and the windows of the court look down on the prison, which had been a cellar in its time. There were 2 types of prisons. One had the purpose of keeping temporary prisoners, and the other, which was closed from all other places, had only one way which led to the court hall. It was situated higher for some meters. After the prisoner was sentenced to death, he was thrown into the cell through the same hole and was forgotten forever. Crossing the entrance hall, another hall opens its doors in front of you. This was considered to be a place of the king's pastime. It's a room for belly dancing, ornamented by mirrors from the left, which doubled the beauty of the scene. In the right, there were windows from where the tasty food was served by the male servants. Every day, his 36 wives danced this belly dance for him. They lived in rooms especially for them. The rooms are arranged in the entire palace and were built with an exclusively delicate style. It's worth mentioning the Pasha's room here. It starts at a hall where the women awaited him. The special part, constructed in the wall, served as a medieval dresser where his clothes were kept. We were assured of the unique existence of this palace, which was thought to be a highly developed system of water supply. But as it was found out later, there were many other, more developed water supply systems in the period of the kingdom of Ararat. On the first floor, there was a lavatory, with its warm and cold water and its own pipe system. This was the bathroom from which the Pasha was delighted by the open scene of the nature. Especially during the ceremonies, such kind of scenes played a great role. In the city, you can find a shop of souvenirs, which in fact is an exhibition of carpets. There is a collection of carpets from the entire world, as well as Armenian carpets. We were shown a carpet with the decorative patterns of the culture of Karabakh. The showing of the carpets is in itself true art, and the owners of the shops, with one touch of the hand, collect, open, and move the carpets skillfully. One of the most expressive patterns is the following one, which represents an Armenian woman and all the letters of the Armenian alphabet, one by one. The owners of the house served their national tea with great enthusiasm, spoke with us, and said goodbye. The next planned stop on the trip, Berkri. If you try to find it on the map, you'll be taken aback, as instead of finding it, you'll see a place called Muradiye, or the waterfalls of Muradiye. Each time, as one admires even the usual miracle of the nature of this territory, the pain of the loss gets stronger, especially standing here, right in front of the waterfalls. Several kilometers away from this place, there is a monastery situated on almost inaccessible mountain heights. St. Stepanos was built in the 15th century. It was a prospering center of book publishing, and where many manuscripts were found. This is a blue, ethereal, infinite but real city spread on the seaside of a dream. For an instant, this shining blue sea makes you go blind, and with much effort needed to open your eyes wider to understand the might of the picture in your view. The color blue is everywhere, even inside of you. Once you see it, you'll never forget it. The sea is a visiting card of the city. It begins much sooner than the city, and with an infectious quietness leads you to the heart of the city. Van is a history of one Armenian kingdom, which was founded by the Armenian kings of Urartu. It was famous by the name Tushpa Van, and was in the Tos province of the state of Vospuragan of Great Hayk. In the 9th century BC, the city was founded by the Urartian king Sarduri I, and later on it became the capital of the country. There are many notes preserved on the walls about the above-mentioned kings. History refers to such kings as Sarduri, Ishpuni, Rusa I, and Rusa II. Today, the souls of these kings have found their shelter in the tomb, which is closed and is opened only for visitors. The fortress of Van is very expressive. Its mighty picture is seen from each corner of the city. It stands on the height of the mountain, and with a watchful glance controls the peace of the historical city. The world of ruins has preserved every little detail of its history. The fortress is a real tourist center. With the object of earning money. It introduces Urartian culture in Turkey, which, as per their interpretations, has nothing in common with the Armenians. Van consists of the main city and suburbs. The center of the city was on the plain of the southern part of the citadel, surrounded by the double walls, which had gates from all sides. picture of the center is well observed from the fortress. A number of churches, a palace, and ruins of city buildings are seen here. The center of the city is the heart of Van. It's here that all the ways, mind, and soul of Van cross. The whisper born here spreads the glory of the city all over the world. From the fortress, the complete scene of Van is brought to one's attention. But unfortunately, looking at this scene is impossible without regret, as the famous city center was also in ruins. After you see everything and get to know the owners of the fortress, your eyes unwillingly seek rest and find their dreams in the boundless blue distance. They catch the amazing silence of the dream, expressing the whole pain of the soul. The voyage to the Holy Memorial brought us to a little Kurdish village. The monastery, with its invisible sacredness, had become inconspicuous while surrounded on three sides by crudeness. Varak Avank, the monastery of Varak, was controlled by a man named Mehmed, who inherited the center of the spiritual and cultural value of a whole nation. Mehmed told us that the monastery had been a cattle shed for many years, and added that starting from childhood, his father had taught him to keep and preserve the monument safe and sound, as it was a house of God and a monument. They preserved it in their own way. They gathered and kept grass and cattle inside of it, and as it became profitable, they took care of it. Mehmed had cleaned the monastery, matched a wooden cross to it, and sold handicrafts made by village women inside it. The remains of the monastery are called Edi Kilise, which means 7 churches. They say it was thusly named, as originally there were 7 churches in Varak Avank. As per legend, one of the holy virgins, named Ripsime, on her way to Valar hid her necklace, which contained a relic of the Holy Cross at the foot of Varak mountain. Soon, in 653, it was found, and Nerses III Tayets built the church of St. Mark on Varak mountain and celebrated the Holy Cross festive performance on Varak. Was it an accident or providence that our trip coincided with the Holy Cross celebration of Varak, which we did in our own way? It had been a long time since the monastery felt the fragrance of incense and blessing of prayer, which had become a memory for those walls. When the sounds of Armenian psalms were heard, the walls echoed surprisingly. Van has two symbolic colors. The first one is a boundless blue, and the second one is a very precious white one. The first symbolizes Lake Van, the second, the Van cat. To find cats in the city is almost impossible, and in order to find them easily, you should go to the University of Van. A special separate building was set aside for the care and breeding of the cats. It's an exclusive cat, which has eyes with two colors, blue and green, and likes swimming in the water very much. One can never come across this kind of thing in any part of the world. They say that the cats of Van are the mixtures of different types of wild cats from many centuries ago. Very often you can see cats with eyes of the same color. Among the 3 to 4 kittens born, only 2 have different colored eyes. The first ones are called ordinary cats and are very expensive. Taking them out of the city is prohibited by law. Nowadays, the people living here say that those cats can only live on the territory of Van as they have adjusted to the local climate. In fact, they don't want to give the symbol of the city away and artificially try to keep a monopoly of it. Especially if we take into account that the cat symbolizes the city, you may see a monument of a mother cat and its kittens in the square of the city. The cat's pictures and the statues are the best souvenirs of Van. Who would want to turn away such kind of live advertisement if the whole world visits the city to see the famous cats of Van? There is a carpet workshop in Van. The carpets are knitted by rather young women whose abilities are highly praised. They use the most expensive threads in their work. Each square meter in the finished knot defines the price of the carpet. The more the knots, the more expensive the carpet. The subjects on the carpets are different, starting from ancient, rocky pictures to Persian, Turkish, and Armenian patterns, and Van's cats and lake scenes. The whole territory is filled with the handmade work. Besides carpets, there are also Eastern-style pillows, home accessories, etc. Usually the carpets represent the scenes of Mount Ararat, Noah's Ark, and also nomadic episodes of people's lives. There are a small number of Armenian carpets found here, thanks to some Armenian families living in a few villages of the province who have preserved the national colors and motifs of Armenian culture. The most typical features of the Armenian carpets are the usage of large patterns and bright colors such as pink, red, and green. Here is an example. There are more exclusive examples, but which were not exhibited because of high price. The territory of ancient Armenia is the cradle of the Armenian soul. It was here that during the centuries of the Armenian era, the epic Sassun David, or David of Sassun, was created and passed from generation to generation. It is where a 1,000-year history about the struggle against alien invaders is summarized. The cave of Akhravakar is the place where little Maher, the last hero of the epic, was locked away. It is situated near Van, some 4 kilometers from the citadel. This stone is famous as Maher's door, which is certified by the following lines. Maher came and reached the mountain of Van. A stone appeared to him, which was called the Stone of Van. When the world was so cruel that even an epic hero could not struggle against it, and the land was very loose and wouldn't hold Maher, he hit the stone of Van with his sword, opened it, and entered. The Armenian hero locked himself in Akravakar and said, "Since the world is so cruel, I'll not stay any longer, for the earth should be destroyed and rebuilt. And when wheat becomes a rosehip, and when barley grows to the size of a nut, then there will be an order to come out of this cave." The very character of Maher symbolizes the soul of the entire Armenian nation. From that very day, Armenia longs for Maher's fateful return to come out of Akravakar, regain its power in Maher's image, and fulfill its innermost dream inherited during the ages. During the trip, we made many discoveries for ourselves, such as the Church of St. Thomas and so on. Another church was found here too. It was half buried in the ground. When we tried to approach it to see it in detail, within a few minutes, the whole village surrounded us. The residents used the church of Gonzak, the village had the same name, as storage for grain. Excited people were walking around us. They were curious that there were those who were also deeply interested in this very storage. Some Armenian records and patterns had been preserved on the walls. St. Thomas Church is on the bank of Lake Van, on a deserted and distant hill. The closer you come to it, the more its image seems ennobled. Approaching the temple is not so easy. You need to wind up a very difficult and almost inaccessible path for 150 meters, but it's worth overcoming any difficulty to see the church. This we understood when we came up to it. It was a real monastic complex, which is why it was built away from populated areas on an impregnable height. Maybe that was the reason that it evaded the ravages of war. The temple is a cruciform, centrally built church which has a forecourt, where records of many Catholicoses are written in Armenian. The tombs of some monks are situated around the temple, where their souls rest eternally. The entrance door is so small that while entering, one has to bow his head, and once inside, the soul also bows. The temple seems to silently gaze at the lake, which is the only dear thing that exists in its current life. The walls are indifferent to all. They seem to have their own thoughts, and whatever you do, you seem unable to break their endless peace. Unwillingly, you want to kiss this miracle and promise that you'll never forget its age-long sorrow. you bow your head, and praying, you leave the temple. After you get acquainted with the mind, soul, grace, and fame of the city, it's time to taste its food. It's herring, the only fish which lives in the Lake of Van. It's a small and very delicious fish, which is only served in the lakeside restaurants. The ceremony starts on the boat when the local fishermen catch them from the depths of the lake. It is surprising, but the fish have the same eye colors as Van cats. Just look at it. It's of a greenish blue and yellow color. The locals call it inji kefal, which means thin fish. It's served with red cracked wheat and very spicy pepper. It is eaten without removing its scales. The preparation is really worth looking at. After tasting this delicious food, the ancient Armenian kochari with zurna and dohol filled the air with its old music. And we started to dance our national dance, and they danced theirs. The miracle of Akhtamar still called us, so we needed a boat to go to the place of dreams, where feelings couldn't possibly express the power of the picture. The main importance of Akhtamar is the Church of Holy Cross, which was very beautiful in the sunlight that day. They say, if the 7 wonders of the world saw this church, they would bow their heads in front of it. Holy Cross is one of the greatest masterpieces of Armenian architecture. The uniqueness of this church is expressed by its rich, 6-rowed walls and highly illustrated artistic wall paintings. In so many words, the illustrations show the struggle of the Armenian nation against Arabic rule and the Erzurumi dynasty, showing the quiet mode of life, imaginations, and hopes of an Armenian coming from distant times. The love and beauty of the sculptures make one look at them for hours. The sculptures of Adam and Eve, Samson, and Goliath are also seen here. In the small model of the church, Gogik is presenting the church to Christ, for his blessing. You seem to hear the lions roar and see the struggle of the bear and panther falling toward a cave, while up above the peasant harvests and makes his wine. Every time you move your glance from one picture to another, it seems that one more entry has crossed the path of history. The temple is famous for its wall paintings. The biblical history of Adam and Eve is depicted on the walls of the drum. The low-lying places are divided into three parts, which successively portray the life of Jesus Christ, his death and glory, the announcing of good tidings and great love, and resurrection scenes. On one side, the style of wall paintings of Akhtamar have to do with Armenian wall painting of the early Middle Ages, and on the other side, a newly formed art direction of the 9th to 10th centuries. Mostly, they are created by caressing, eye-pleasing colors, as light blue, yellow, and in some places red and gray. Thanks to the great mastery of painting, the pictures pass to the observer even the soul of the events and the striking details of the heroes' faces, which express the atmosphere of the scene of those times. Highly artistically created sacred images stretched to above the temple walls, drawing the stunned glances of the visitors. Some of the wall paintings are partly violated. The Church of Holy Cross, due to its perfection, stayed as a unique item in middle-aged art. The pictures and sculptures of the church had an impression both on the further development of Armenian sculpture and Vospuragan miniature art school formation in the 13th to 14th centuries. Up to 1895, the Church of Holy Cross served as a spiritual center of Catholicoses. After that, during the whole next century, it was doomed to be abandoned, both as a church and as a sacred place. The reconstruction of Holy Cross started in 2005 and on the whole lasted 2 years. Essentially, it was an unprecedented event. For the first time, the Turkish government passed a resolution to repair an Armenian church. One doesn't need much farsightedness to understand that it's not a moral step done for merely noble reasons, but for the reason of political gain of affiliation to the European Union. As a result, there is the fact that one example of the greatest masterpieces of our architecture was saved from the harmful influences of time. With its new appearance, the Church of Holy Cross was presented to the world on the 29th of March. During the renovation of the church, the Turkish government announced that a cross would be placed on its dome. Nevertheless, the promise was not fulfilled during opening day ceremonies, as it was presented as a museum. A worldwide cultural inheritance, and the fact of it being of Armenian origin, was as if hidden behind a veil. According to the opinion of specialists, the repair was literate and correct, as nothing on it was changed. Therefore, time would show whether the cross would be placed on it and if the building will be used as a sacred place. It's evening, and we left the island with our bodies and souls blessed by the waters of Van. and with the picture of Akhtamar with the torch in her hand impressed in our eyes. Nature itself presented a splendid sunset overflowing in all its colors. Only the water and sky, joined with the magnetic notes of the night, accompanied the birds flying in the open air. We just enjoyed the gift that was served to us, and the last sunlight, and said goodbye to the miracle of the Holy Cross Church. The way by Van's shore leads the visitor to the city of Datvan, which was under the ministry of Baznuni's dynasty. At the end of the 10th century, it was included in the Erzurumi kingdom of Ospuragan. As per legend, it had been a cottage of King Senekerim Erzurumi. There had been a seaport which exists nowadays too. It is also a part of a railway station. The trains are transmitted by ships to the station, from where they continue their way. There were 6 churches around the city. We found the remains of only 2 of them. One of the inhabitants of Choglin village, named Chelik, on his own initiative, helped us in this matter. Maybe the legends about gold made those surrounding us think that being Armenian by origin, you should know the place of the hidden gold. They thought that by helping you, they would get their share. Chelik showed us the following ruins of the Church of St. Hakob. The 3 remaining walls of which held the so-called roof covered by soil and stone. With all its effort, it tried to show its ex-beauty, but in vain, because reality was much more evident and stronger. Chelik showed another church in the far distance, which one of the oldest women in the village said was called Der. Later, we came to know Der meant church in the Kurdish language, like Turkish kilise. In fact, the real name of the church was Histi Busti and was built in 1708 by Mesrop Bartabet. Before saying goodbye, Chelik told us some stories that surprised us greatly. There were 2 more churches next to it, which were destroyed by the mayor of the city, Mustafa Ara, in 2002. To our question asking why he had done this, Chelik answered that he didn't know anything about it. The next church was in Elmal Kyoy village, also known as Khunzorgin, and was called Karasnits Mangats Church. It was built in 1450. Today, its owner is a rather fine young man named Burhan Akbi. It seemed that realizing the great value of his property, he tried to take care of it as much as possible. He used the church for economic purposes, keeping grass here and so on. Burhan said that the churches are mostly ruined by Turkish people. And if a government order told to destroy it, he could do nothing but to obey. But till that day comes, he would take care of it. The old name of Bitlis is Baresh. It is a squalid city with narrow and ugly streets. You seem to be in an eastern market where everybody is arguing about something. You almost find only men in the streets who look at the stranger in such a way that it seems they're ready to quarrel with the passerby at any moment. In fact, Baresh had been a nice city, which has changed, reflecting today's way of life. Baresh had been a city in Great Hayk's Oghuznik province, 18 kilometers west from Lake Van. It corresponded with the main fortress of Oghuznik village of Salnozor province. They say it was founded by Alexander the Macedonian after his invasion of Armenia. After evaluating the location of the mountain pass, he had ordered his military leader, Lys, to build a fortress here, and it was so invincible that he himself could not occupy it. When the keys of the fortress had been voluntarily handed to Alexander, he named the fortress Char Lys, which in the Persian language meant Fortress of Lys. This is how the name of the city was fixed as Bitlis. In the center of the Bashan Gorge, on a rocky hill stretching upward, there is a medieval fortress with its high walls and lined towers, where you can enter, passing 3 movable bridges, which had been built in succession. These do not exist today. Our way is precipitous and hard. From the eastern part of the fortress, the Khans had thrown the prisoners sentenced to death. That's why it was called Kanli Kale by the people, in other words, Bloody Tower. The houses are arranged in amphitheater form, spread on the slope. There was a market in the gorge. The houses and other buildings were made of a stone called put, a white marble or broken tone. There were a great number of many-storied residences and caravanseries. In Baresh, you could see public bathhouses for both men and women, which haven't been preserved nowadays. There is a cigarette factory in Bitlis that has a silent and unrevealed secret, which is right in the yard of the factory. From first sight, it seems to be a common, unsightly, right-angled hall. But when the doors open, your eyes freeze from the unusual scene, a wonderful church with 16 crossed arches. We were so astonished by its beauty that for a moment we forgot why we had come here. As those of the household hurried us, we tried our best to take pictures of the church to take back with us. We parted, saying goodbye to Bitlis, taking with us the gloominess of the present and the splendor of the past. While leaving Bitlis, we set on our way to Mush, but couldn't resist yielding to the attention of the rising Nemrut mountain. People say that it was named according to its appearance, which meant a gloomy face. Standing in the middle of the field, its large-scale appearance horrifies by its might, and with a silent voice calls to itself. Nemrut is a dead volcano, the last eruption of which was in the 15th century, almost 500 years ago. It's a world by itself in this world of ours, with its own nature, with weather that was much warmer than outside of it. Inside, a human had long ago made his paths and set his guiding panels. We continued our ways by twisting and turning, once rising, then going down the mountain. The nature was marvelous. Outside it was autumn, but inside, spring. of the paths there were two panels, one leading to the warm lake, the other to the steam coming from under the ground. At first, we believed in the existence of a warm lake, but in vain. I don't know whether it was only mere words, but the water of the lake was cold. The second panel turned out to be right. At the end of the path, through the stones, the hot steam rose from under the ground. It seemed, after standing there for a long time, all illness would leave you forever. There are a few lakes in the crater of Nemrut. The first one is supposed to be a warm lake, and the second one, a freshwater lake, which was much bigger and more impressive. It was like a little oasis surrounded by all colors of nature. After passing all the paths, we turned our way to the reverse side of the mountain. If you managed to see all this, it means you have seen all of Nemrut. "64,000 people live in Mush today, 60,000 of whom are Kurds, 1,000 Turkish and 3,000 are Armenians, most of whom are Muslims, by whom the main important institutions are managed. Mush is a city in the Darun province of Great Hayk, in the state of Duru-Peran. It is in the southern part of the plains of Mush. As per the legend, the name of Mush has arisen from the word mist, taking into account the hazy, misty weather in the plains of Mush during the whole year. Mush is noted as a fortress and also as a town. In ancient times, Mush belonged to Silkunis, then to Mamikonians, which ran the Armenian officer corps. In its new stage, Mush was divided into Armenian and Turkish parts, and had two districts. It had stone bathhouses and inns for travelers. One of the branches of the river Megraged passes through the middle of the city. It is the left branch of the Aratzani River, and it divides Mush into two parts. On its bank, there is a bathhouse right in the gorge. This is one of the unique and exceptional Armenian constructions that have been preserved in Mush in our days. It is rather remarkable by its structure. In the territory of present Armenia, you can hardly find such an example of a preserved bathhouse, having a few rooms and arranged pipes in the walls by which cold and hot water were supplied. In front of the bathhouse, there is an Armenian tomb on the slope, where they say Gevorg Chavush was buried. Those looking for gold have corrupted the tombs of the deceased, so much that you could hardly find anything here but deep sorrow. Today, Mush is a large and beautiful city, with its former Armenian and Turkish districts, which at present are inhabited by Kurdish people. In the ex-Armenian district, we found the following ruined building turned into a garbage dump. It is thought to be a Catholic church. It had been turned into a prison by Turks. witnessed by the bars on the windows high on the church walls. People built a church that had, due to a ruthless providence, turned into a prison for them in the future. When we were near the church, one of the local dwellers approached us ceremonially, stood on a stone, and with great pride started to tell how they had slaughtered the local Armenians. Sickened, we followed this man's horrifying stories, who smiled as he told us about how they had fulfilled this massacre. There had been other churches in the old district, but not even a single stone of them has been preserved. One of them was turned into a mosque, which has nothing but one wall remaining of the former Armenian church. After seeing Mush, the road took us out into the country, in the direction of a village where we saw such things a sober man couldn't even imagine. On the way to a village, at a distance of 10 kilometers, one searching his Armenianism brings him to the Suluk bridge, the name of which most probably came from the residence next to it called Suluk. It was built in the 13th century on the river Ararat. Being zigzag in shape, it has been called by the same name, zigzag, by the natives. Besides the outward beauty, it also has a sad story, as one of the greatest heroes was killed here. The breath of the betrayal of Gevorg Chavush is felt here. Once, being wounded under the bridge, the great hero asked for a cup of water from a Kurdish bypasser, who in turn became acquainted with Chavush. The Kurd asked who he was, to which Chavush proudly gave his name. The peasant rushed to tell that Gevorg Chavush himself was laid up wounded under the bridge. Soon after that, the living legend was killed by the hands of conspirators. The church of St. Garabed is 50 kilometers from Mush on the road to Erzurum. Such the whole complex is called, when in reality there is no church at all. Nevertheless, the magnificent monastery had existed there. There is a village named Chengili, where all the walls of the houses are sacred, as they had been built from sacred, polished stones tarred with chrism, and khachkars, cross stones. This residence had been created on the ruins of a place sacred for the Armenians, the foundation of which embodies the monastery of St. Garabed, where the remains of Hovhannes Mugardich, John the Baptist, are interred. When we stepped into the village, all the dwellers came to see us. It was interesting to see how these two worlds, strange to each other, met on the piece of earth which each considered belonged to them. The people living here were rather more backwards in their way of living than we expected. After they came to know we were Armenians, they at once started to take us here and there, proudly showing the remains of Armenian culture. At first we were surprised, as everything was temporarily incomprehensible, but later it became much more terrifying. A stone on a threshold was a khachkar. Another marble khachkar, which was meant for church christenings, was attached into the wall. And ornamental relics of a khachkar were on the door of a house. On the walls of the house were carved records of Armenian Catholicoses, priests, Armenian families, khachkars, and information about family members living there. It was a huge building complex, a masterpiece of the Armenian mind and soul, which today has become a natural supplement of the Kurdish mode of life. After the christening of Teradati III and the adoption of Christianity as a state religion in Armenia, Gregory the Illuminator made his way to Daron to spread the new religion. At those times, in the location of the monastery, there was a pagan temple with golden idols, worshipped by the locals. It was here that Gregory, in the place of this temple, founded the St. Garabed Monastery. As is seen in the photographs taken in the beginning of the 20th century, the monastery was surrounded by mighty walls, and with this walled appearance, it was like many other places of residence in the region. The principal church of the monastery was similar to a big hall, to which two smaller churches were attached. The oldest building of the architectural complex was a bell tower. The third name of this monastery is in Turkish, Çanlı, which means with bell tower. After the massacres and immigration of Armenians, St. Garabed stopped being not only a spiritual center, but also an architectural monument. It was blown up by the Turkish army. One of the villagers told us that the monastery was supposedly ruined by an earthquake in 1966, after which the villagers had gathered the ruined stones, built the houses, and created their own village. Whatever had been preserved from the church formed the parts of different houses, or maybe a shed or a barn. The church had had an upper floor, which has mostly collapsed. That's why I am clearing off the snow. Otherwise, it would be destroyed completely. The best stones had been taken out of it. My grandfather told that those stones had been taken even to Istanbul. There was a door inside of it, which led to another church. This was a complete monastical complex, and only 90 years have passed since St. Garabed's existence as a monastery. In the end, the Kurd tried to convince us to give him money to repair the monastery churches, saying in the end it would be destroyed completely. I wonder what he meant saying a church. Their grass barn or the walls of their houses. You cannot stay here for a long time, because after some time you seem to have trouble breathing and start to choke from those scenes of vandalism. Leaving these places, you start to understand that you cannot endure it even one more time. Modern Erzurum, with its population of 400,000, is the biggest region of eastern Turkey. Even though Erzurum is one of the most ancient cities of Armenia, only a trace of national culture is felt here, the rest being resigned to history. The foundation of the city is put in the second half of the 2nd century BC. It was founded by the Armenian king Karani. Thus the city was named Karin. It was a great center of handicraft and scientific culture, where Armenians lived and created. From the distant past, Karin was populated by Armenians. Up to the 4th century, it was in the center of the province of Karin, in the kingdom of Armenia, in the time of the rule of the Yervantunis, Ardashesyans, and Arshakunis. In 387, when Armenia was divided for the first time, it passed under the rule of the Roman Empire, and Karin was called Theodopolis, in the name of Emperor Theodorus. Starting from the 5th century, Karin became an apple of discord between Persians and Byzantines. In 885, after the foundation of the Bagratuni kingdom, Karin also entered the Armenian state. In 1049, the Seljuks conquered and destroyed the Armenian city of Artsin, the Armenian population of which started to migrate to Karin, after which they called it Artsin. As the city was under the sphere of the Byzantine Empire, to differ from the former name, they started to call it Arnzar Rum, which in the future became Erzurum, For a short period, the Zakarians drove away the Seljuk Turk tribes, but in 1242 the city passed under the rule of Tatar Mongols. In the 19th to 20th centuries, Russians occupied Gardin 3 different times, after which it again fell under Ottoman rule. By the Adrianopolis Peace Treaty, Russia returned Gardin to the Ottoman Empire, along with many other cities and hundreds of villages. The population, with its patriarchate, took refuge in Akhalkalak, Akhaltsikha, Lori, and other cities and regions. At the end of the 20th century, the city consisted of a citadel, fortress, and suburbs. Nowadays, the fortress, which in the past had a citadel, was built on the hill in the middle of the city. In the southern part of Teps is a minaret, which served as a court. At the entrance of the fortress, there is a little note for visitors that says it's a Turkish construction built in the 5th century. Ascribing this Armenian fortress to Turkish culture, they give much importance to it as being one of the first examples of their culture, despite the fact that Turks appeared here 6 centuries after that. Most walls and towers of the fortress were ruined during the earthquake of 1859. There were Armenian records on the walls that have been completely lost. Armenians here were engaged in trade and handicraft. The cultural life of Armenians was also developed at that time. Many manuscripts were created there. Armenian colleges were also founded, the ruins of which we later found in the middle of the city. Most probably, it's the only Armenian thing that has left a trace here. Near the college, besides St. Osvadzazin Church, there also must have been some other churches, all of them unfortunately left only in the sweet memories of history. As a rule, some Muslim constructions of the city were either of Christian origin or had been built in the locations of ex-Armenian churches. The most significant site of Muslim Erzurum is the pair of towers of Medres. In front of the building there was a tablet which said it was a construction from the beginning of the 13th to 14th centuries, which served as a shooting center. Later, it was turned to a winter residence in the times of the Ottoman king Murad IV. We had the impression that it was a very important holy place for them, yet even though it was a mosque, it didn't serve its purpose. While standing in front of the building, an unexpected thing happened. 2 Muslim passers-by said that the place they called Jamin was a place where Armenians massacred Turkish people, and that was the reason the place could no longer be used as a holy place. True or false, either way, that was rather surprising for us. In any event, the story of Gardin was strange, and didn't correspond to the stories that our forefathers had told about this Armenian city. The fact is that we could only show the current reality, which is not very reassuring. Today, Basen is a large village. In the past, though, it was not simply a city. It had the name of the general province of the region of Great Hayk. It was divided into upper and lower parts. One of the illustrious buildings of Basen is Hasan Kale, or Hasan Fortress. The name of the fortress is ascribed to Prince Hasan, who was a relative of Grigor Magistros. Turkish historians invented the story that in the 15th century the fortress was named after Uzun Hasan, leader of Ak tribe. The double wall of Hasan Kale was built on the top of a cliff. It had a single gate citadel with an entrance anticipated only for pedestrians. The panoramic sight shows the little city in a way that each stranger that appeared in the city found himself in the center of attention for all. The fortress is not so big, but as it's built with great skill, it deserves much attention. In Upper Basen, on the way to the countryside, there is an Armenian construction. It's the 7-arched magnificent bridge of the herdsman, built on the disobedient soul of the river Ararat. The date of its construction is unknown. Many bridges have been built here, but all were destroyed by the river. A herdsman with great skill undertook the task of building a bridge that nothing could destroy. This bridge was called Herdsman in his honor. On our way to Artvin, a surprise was waiting for us. It was one of the most beautiful roads we have ever seen. The road seemed to be a treasury, where each treasure had chosen its place and independently placed itself there. The brown tablet prompted about each cultural and spiritual treasure, like fortresses, churches, and memorials not of human making, but created by nature. You needed only to choose which of them was necessary to you and move on your way to new discoveries. The first discovery was the bluish Tortum Lake, which was like an oasis in the mountains. The lake turned into a shalale, that is to say, a waterfall. The mixture of the real and unreal, along with the colors of the rainbow, had been reflected in the water. A human being has combined his ideas with nature, and as a result, it has turned into the waterfall Tortum. We were passing a way blessed by stars, which led through the mountains. The way that we passed by morning and night was buried in lots of trees. One tablet made us stop and realize that our choice had been made, that we wanted to see the church of St. Mariam Asfadzadzin. We expected to see a simple church, expecting not to see much. What could be there in a distant little village? Perhaps just a nice little chapel. But what we saw much surpassed all our expectations. At the end of the village, in the thick forest, we saw a dome. Later, we saw its grand contours. It was St. Mariam, with its delicate stone construction. The church was open and functioning. For a moment, it seemed to us that there was some magic there, that an Armenian church functioned in a Turkish village, but in vain. There was no magic at all. It had been turned into St. Mariam Mosque. It's an old relic of the period of the Bagratunis. It was built by David III Bagratuni in 978 to 1001. On the church, there were highly artistic sculptures of a lion, an eagle, a wild pig, and a griffin. Inside the church, there were colorful pictures of a history and its people. The Bible seemed to be alive on the walls of the temple. On the ground, under these walls, there was a Muslim carpet, and on the right side, there was a mullah's pulpit. None of the owners were inside. St. Mariam had been a complex. The main church had had entrances to the attached repositories. After being turned into a mosque, those entrances were closed and painted in the color green. The other parts of the church were isolated and were, little by little, becoming ruins. Under the paint, Some parts of the church murals had been left, which didn't at all diminish its beauty. The upper part proved the church to be a masterpiece. The most impressive thing here was the dome, where, on the top, just in the middle, lost in the splash of blue painting, a cross was depicted. We wondered how it had been preserved. The Muslim visitors prayed just under it. You wanted to believe in the power of art, which made the people obedient, so that the populations with different religions couldn't annihilate and destroy this beauty. We could say that the church of St. Mariam of Tortum was the most impressive among all the churches, because in the church-turned mosque, a cross had been preserved, and this reality had left its trace deep in our memories. The scene of St. Mariam was unrepeatable. The road led us through a deep, tight gorge, which was not tiring at all due to the beauty of the scenery. The changing scenes of nature kept our glances alert. Passing through the gorge, we saw an incline, stretching to a city on the slope, lost in the deep abyss. It's better if you find yourself in the city for the first time at night. In the darkness, it seemed that millions of fireflies had been collected here in the tender hug of mighty nature, which listens to their talk. Armine seemed to be somebody's crazy idea, which had been turned into reality. It could not be described in any other words but a unity of the unusual and of beauty, which is what we saw in the city. There were no level streets in Armine. They all either go up or down. Approaching the city, the way started to rotate. At first you went down, then up the mountains. The atmosphere in Armine was rather warm and hospitable. Today's Armine couldn't be compared with Armenian Armine. Today, it's completely a Turkish city. In the Middle Ages, it was a well-built Armenian trade center, which was known as a settlement of the urban type. In the 9th century, it was included in the kingdom of Artanunj Bagratuni, and in the 11th century, in the Georgian Bagratuni kingdom. Armine could be spoken about much, but it was time for us to leave. Here our journey came to its end. While leaving, strong feelings stirred in our souls. We were returning home, yet we were leaving our home. But our will had become much stronger. When you see the great loss with your own eyes, only then do you understand the real value of it. What we lost was invaluable, but our faith was still strong. We still remember that all this was ours. Others won't forget, as long as we remember. You should know your history and do your best to pass it from generation to generation. You should fight for the historical, absolute truth, and to prove to the whole world that you are the owner of your wealth. We have made only a small step, and hope that it will stimulate each of us to consider it his or her duty to bring the lost motherland back.